They built cathedrals that stayed warm in winter, without a single furnace. They lit palaces brighter than modern hotels, without one wire in the walls. They kept food cold for months, without electricity, without refrigerators, without anything we would recognize today. And here's what nobody talks about. These weren't primitive people guessing their way through life. These were engineers, sophisticated ones, the kind who looked at a hillside and saw an air conditioning system, who looked at the sun and designed a heating grid that would make a modern architect sweat with envy. We were told that before electricity, there was darkness, but the buildings don't agree, because some of these structures still work, right now, today, without a single kilowatt of power. So the real question isn't how they did it. The real question is, why did we stop? What you're about to see isn't a conspiracy. It isn't folklore. It's architecture, physics, and a history that somehow got very, very quiet. Before we go further, if you're the kind of person who asks questions that make others uncomfortable, subscribe. You'll fit right in here. Let's start with a building that should not exist. Built over 600 years ago. No electricity, no HVAC system, no engineers with laptops and climate software, and yet, the inside temperature never drops below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, even in the dead of winter. Welcome to the Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain. The architects didn't fight the climate, they used it. They carved channels of cold water beneath the floors, running like veins through the stone. The water absorbed heat. The room stayed cool, automatically, constantly, without anyone flipping a single switch. But here's what hits different. That system has been running, in some form, for 6 centuries. Your home HVAC unit lasts maybe 15 years before it needs replacing. Theirs outlasted entire civilizations. And the Alhambra isn't alone. The ancient Persians built structures called Yakhchāls, massive mud brick domes that produced and stored ice in the middle of a desert. Not near ice, not close to mountains. In the desert. They used the night sky as a radiator. Thin pools of water would lose heat upward into the cold atmosphere after sunset, and by morning, ice had formed. Ice in a desert, without power. Modern engineers have studied these structures and called them, and I'm quoting here, thermodynamically sophisticated. That's scientist language for, we're not entirely sure how they did this so well, which raises the first uncomfortable question of this video. If they could do all this with mud, water, and geometry, what exactly did we gain by forgetting it? Now let's talk about light, because before Edison, before gas lamps, before any of it, buildings were bright, uncomfortably, inexplicably bright. The Pantheon in Rome was built nearly 2,000 years ago. Walk inside today and you'll find it naturally lit, evenly, beautifully, from a single circular hole in the ceiling called the oculus. No chandeliers, no bulbs, no reflectors, just one hole, and perfect light. But the Romans didn't stop there. They coated entire walls in a material called specularia, thin slabs of crystallized gypsum, almost perfectly transparent, functioning as windows that scattered and amplified daylight deep into interior rooms that had no business being that bright. Then there's the Egyptian temples at Dendera. Archaeologists found detailed carvings on the walls that, depending on who you ask, look remarkably like elongated light bulbs, complete with what appears to be a filament inside. Now, is that proof of ancient electricity? Probably not, but here's what is documented. Ancient Egyptian surgeons performed incredibly detailed procedures inside tombs, deep underground, where torches would consume oxygen and leave soot. Yet, no soot was ever found on the ceilings, none. So either they operated in the dark, or they had a light source we haven't officially explained yet. The historians say mirrors and reflected sunlight, which works until you map the geometry of those tunnels. The angles don't line up, not even close, so the light got in somehow. We just don't know how, and that silence in the historical record is somehow louder than any answer. Let's talk about something even more unsettling than light. Let's talk about air, specifically how ancient buildings moved it, filtered it, and controlled it, with zero mechanical parts. The Romans had a system called the Hypocaust. Translated literally, it means heat from below. They built raised floors on small brick columns, creating a hollow space underneath. Hot air from a furnace would flow through that space, rise through the walls, and heat the entire room from the inside out. Not from a vent in the corner, from the walls themselves, entire bathhouses, villas, government buildings, all of them, essentially wearing warmth like a second skin. But the Romans weren't the most sophisticated ones. That title might belong to the Persians. Again, they engineered towers called wind catchers, tall, open-faced columns built on top of homes and public buildings. Each tower faced the direction of prevailing winds. The tower would catch the breeze, force it downward through the building, across underground water channels, cooling it, then release it back out through the opposite side. A completely passive air conditioning system. No filters to replace, no refrigerant to leak, no electricity bill arriving at the end of the month. Cities in Iran still use them today. But here's the part that keeps architects up at night. When researchers modeled these wind catchers using modern computer simulations, they found the original builders had already optimized the angles to near perfect efficiency. Not close to perfect, near perfect. Like someone had already run the simulation, centuries before computers existed. Everything we've covered so far has one thing in common: heat, light, air. They all follow predictable physics. But water is where this story gets genuinely strange, because ancient civilizations didn't just use water, they commanded it, in ways that modern engineers have quietly admitted they still don't fully understand. The ancient city of Petra in Jordan sits in the middle of a desert canyon, harsh, dry, brutal, and yet it supported over 30,000 people. Researchers discovered an elaborate hydraulic system carved directly into the canyon walls: pipes, dams, reservoirs, pressure regulators. In 300 BC, the system didn't just deliver water, it controlled the flow rate, preventing floods during heavy rains and maintaining supply during droughts, automatically, without a single electronic sensor. Then there's the Nazca civilization in Peru. They built underground aqueducts called Puquios, spiral openings in the earth that funneled wind pressure downward to push water through underground channels across the desert. No pumps, no electricity, no external power source, just wind and geometry, and an understanding of fluid dynamics that universities now spend years teaching. But the detail nobody mentions in textbooks: when modern engineers attempted to replicate the Nazca Puquios using contemporary tools and materials, they failed, not partially, completely. The water pressure calculations defeated them. These ancient engineers solved a problem that our best modern minds, with every tool available, couldn't reproduce from scratch. So ask yourself, who exactly were the primitive ones? So here's where everything gets uncomfortably quiet. Every system we've talked about, the cooling, the light, the airflow, the water, they all worked flawlessly for centuries. And then they stopped being built, not because they failed, not because something better replaced them. They just disappeared from practice. The knowledge didn't evolve, it evaporated. And history offers us very few explanations for why. What we do know is this: the Library of Alexandria didn't just hold scrolls of poetry and philosophy. It held engineering manuals, architectural blueprints, hydraulic calculations, centuries of accumulated technical knowledge, gone. And after it burned, the buildings got simpler, noticeably, measurably simpler. Coincidence, say the historians, maybe. But here's the final detail that stays with you. Researchers studying medieval European buildings, constructed after this knowledge was lost, found something heartbreaking inside the walls. Crude imitations, builders trying to recreate Roman heating systems from memory, from rumor, from second-hand descriptions passed down through generations like a broken telephone. They knew something had existed, they just couldn't remember how, like inheriting a machine with no instruction manual. And standing there, staring at it, knowing it worked once. That's not ancient history, that's a warning. Because right now, today, we are building systems that require constant power, constant maintenance, and constant resources to do what mud, geometry, and observation once did for free. We didn't advance beyond these builders. We just forgot we were ever standing on their shoulders. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most unsettling thing in this entire video. If this made you see history differently, subscribe, because there's an entire world of forgotten knowledge we haven't even touched yet, and we're just getting started.